If you enjoy watching Common Ground online, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution at lptv.org. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Hi, I'm Rachel Johnson, and thanks for joining us on Common Ground. In tonight's episode, potter and sculptor Celia Littlecreek demonstrates the throwing of 3 different works on her potter's wheel. Utilizing the Region 2 Arts Council, the Red Lake native eagerly expands her techniques and has learned from professionals all over the world. Littlecreek teaches us that every day is as different as the sculptures she creates.
My name is Celia Littlecreek. I'm a native of Red Lake. I was born here but moved away when I was 3. They had what was called a relocation program, and they gave us a one-way bus ticket to a big city, and I grew up in Chicago. In the early 50s, the federal government wanted to acclimate, might be a good word, all of the native peoples into non-native society, and their way of doing that was to furnish a one-way ticket to a big city. So I was born here but grew up in Chicago, right by the steel mills. In a project, really, I attended lots and lots of sick days with my mom at the Art Institute. When we went to Chicago, we didn't have much money. My dad was a bookkeeper. I think he actually was an accountant, but he didn't like working inside, so he decided to be a crankshaft grinder, and I have no idea if they even have crankshafts on cars anymore. But we lived there with not very much money, 5 kids, and we tried to move into the projects, and at that time the projects were segregated. There were white projects and black projects. And we were on the waiting list for many years, 3 or 4 years, I believe. And finally, a spot came open in the South Side project. The area is called South Deering, and it was right by the steel mills. My mom really wanted to live someplace other than in apartments on top of bars. So she heard about this project, and she knew people that lived there from people that were in our church, and she heard of an opening, went there, and was told that there were still no openings. She saw the empty houses and she went back, and they told her that she couldn't live there. There were no openings, and the real reason is because we were not black or white. We were Native Americans, and I guess we weren't white enough to live in the segregated project. But my mother, being the persistent woman that she is, threatened to file a suit. And lo and behold, an opening in the housing project came up about 2 months later. So I really treasure all of the experiences that I had growing up in a big city, growing up where there was art to go see, and even at that time there was art at the YMCA. You could take classes, and that's what my mom did. She took oil painting classes at the Y, and she was a big encouragement to all of the things that I do today. She doesn't do that anymore. She's 83, but she's still interested in art and on the go, and still is willing to take me with her to go to art shows and things. And now back to the pottery. I want to show you 3 things today. Just one of them is just a basic pot. Another one is people always ask me, how do you throw a round ball? Which I do on some of my sculptures. And another thing that I've learned is how to throw a double-walled vessel. And I learned all of these things by attending workshops. The double-walled vessel I learned from a potter named Doug Gray. And some of the other things I'll show you I learned from Dan and Rudy. She was a big help in the things that I do. And these things I learned because Region 2 Arts Council has been very generous in letting me attend workshops. And I think I've attended 3 with their help. And that's been one of the best things that I've taken advantage of, and that I think other people should look into if they want to learn how to do something, is to contact their local arts organizations and look for grants to help them do the things they want to do. What I'm going to do first is just throw a simple vase. What I'm doing on the wheel right now is called centering, and you can see it's not too wobbly. That's centered as far as I'm concerned. If it's not centered, it looks like that. And on my really good days, when I go to sleep at night, and in my head I think about how the day has gone, if I can see the ball of clay being centered, I feel like I've had a good day. And I kind of have judged my life by whether or not my days are centered. And I keep trying to center. What I'm doing now is called opening the pot. And I'm just making a big hole and thinning out the walls a little bit. And I'm going to smooth the bottom. We want that bottom to be what's called compressed. That means all the little clay particles are as close as they can be together. We don't want any air spaces in there because those spaces hold water. And when you heat it up in the kiln, the water expands in those spaces and your pot blows up. And right now I'm going to thin it out a little bit more. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to start pulling the pot, and it gets a little bit taller. Just kind of go slow. I like to keep my rim smooth, try to keep it level. And I'm going to make it a little bit thinner at the bottom and pull again. And the pot gets a little bigger gradually. The sponge is to keep water on the pot so it slides between your fingers. And another way that I learned to do that without holding the sponge, and I really like this method, but this one I learned from Dan and Rudy at one of the workshops I went to. She's a teacher and potter in Texas, and she has such good ideas. This keeps the right amount of moisture in the gloves between your fingers and the pots. Smooth out the bottom. If you don't compress the clay, it gets what's called an S-crack when you fire it. Those are not fun when you do as much to get a finished product. What I'm doing now is called pulling. And you're pulling up the clay from the bottom of the pot. Try to keep too much of that moisture in there. We don't want it too wet. Then we can start shaping the pot. Don't want to get it too thin or it collapses. That's the beauty of clay. If you don't like something, mush it up back into a ball, re-wedge it, and start over. If your walls get too thin, they collapse, mush it up and start over. There's no reason to have a shape you're not happy with. Mush it up, wedge it up, start over again. Okay, maybe a little bit thinner on the bottom. Pretty much everything starts with a cylinder. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shape the pot. Normally I have a whole bucket of tools, but for this purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to use my favorite ones. This is a sharp little rib that you have to be careful with because it's made out of super thin steel, I think. And what I'm doing now is I'm pushing on the inside of the pot, and I'm letting the rib be my other hand, and it's making the walls of the pot a uniform thickness. And I'm getting a little bit of a shape there. I'm liking it. And maybe a little more shoulder to the pot. There's the belly. Now working up to the shoulder. Oh, that's looking pretty good. Nice and smooth, I like that. What I'm going to do is I really don't like a big mouth all the time. So I'm going to collar that in a little bit. Get a little narrower. Keep my rim level there. I'll pull up my clay a little more because it's a little thick at the top now. Getting better. Looking good. My other favorite tool is this little blue rib, softer, bends. Can't cut yourself with this one. Haven't yet anyway. And I'm going to smooth it out a little more. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a lip there. Sometimes it gets a little thin, and you want your clay to be all of the same thickness when you're throwing a pot. So what I'm going to do is, this is a little trick I learned at a class in Utah at the Salt Lake City Arts Center. And it's a way to thicken up your clay, and it gives a little bit of expression to your pot. And I'm just going to turn over that uneven edge and lay it down right against the pot. Now I've got a little thicker lip. And looks interesting. Might need to be a little thinner. I'll squish it down there some more. Okay, that's looking pretty good. However, you can see my lip there is wobbling, so I'm going to use my needle tool. Some people never use this. They just say, oh, that's movement. And I like movement on some parts of my pots, and some I like nice and straight. I think I'd like to organize my life like my pot. Some days I want to be just as smooth and right as can be and close to perfect, and some days I want to be rough and what I called planned spontaneity. I've tried to be spontaneous, but doesn't always work, so I plan my spontaneity. This is not one of those pots. Another favorite tool coming up right here. I'm going to take off most of the clay at the bottom of my pot because trimming is not one of my favorite things. So I make my pot so it doesn't really need trimming. My walls are thick enough that the pot will hold its weight there. The walls aren't going to collapse. There's a plain pot. I like this for some of my glazes. Sometimes I like a little more texture in them, not a lot, but a little more. So I can do that with this tool. Make little spirals. Do this with a brush or a fork. Now all of those places there that are rough will catch the glaze. The pot will dry in a little while, and I'll clean off all of those little goobers there. And that'll be a good one for catching a really wet glaze. And a wet glaze is a glaze that's shiny. There are wet glazes and dry glazes. When I go to art shows, I have some sculptures that I called my teetering sculptures. It's a comment about everybody's life, I think. At some point in your life, you're always teetering on the edge. This little system I learned about in a group I belong to on the internet. That's another place where I really learn a lot, is from this listserv, Ceramics Arts Daily. And they have videos, they have experienced potters. This clay is too much clay for what I want to show you. So I'll take a little bit off. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to make a ball. And you probably think, why ever in the earth would you need a ball when you can make all those nice pots? But I do some sculptures called teetering. And I liken it to my life, and I probably can liken it to anybody's life, is that at some point in your life, you're teetering on the edge. And because we're strong people, we don't fall off and break or crack. We just teeter until we get back to where we're not teetering anymore. And that's the purpose of that sculpture, is to remind us that we can hang on, that we can teeter for a while if we have to. We don't always have to be steady and right in the center and perfectly balanced or perfectly anchored, that everybody has enough strength to teeter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make one of those balls for a teetering sculpture. And starts out the same way. Open it up to half an inch maybe on this one. And start throwing the cylinder. And bring up my cylinder a little more. And to make this ball, I'm going to close off the mouth of my pot. Thinning out the walls a little bit, not too thin, because I have to do some trimming on these when they're done. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close off the lip here and thin my clay out a little bit more so I have that nice even thickness. And it's getting there. Getting kind of round. Thin it out a little more. And pinch it. Oops, didn't quite close. Now, there's all kinds of air in there. But it doesn't look like a ball yet. So, I'll take this other sharp rib here. And we'll make it a circle, kind of. An orb. Pretty close to round. Now, because this is full of air, it's going to hold its shape a lot better than a vase or a pot. So I can take out a little more clay because that air is holding up the walls for me. Good enough. Now when this is leather hard, I'll turn it upside down and I'll trim the other side and it'll be round. So that is one of my round balls that I'm going to use on my sculptures. Now you can't let all of that air stay in there. Just make a little hole in it. And that's enough for the air to escape so it doesn't explode when you put it in the kiln. What I'm doing now is I'm going to throw a double wall vessel. This is something I learned in another workshop I went to. And this is a technique I learned from Doug Gray. A pretty big chunk of clay for me to center. Maybe I should have started with a smaller piece, but we'll see how it goes. This one I'm going to open up all the way to the bottom of the wheel head. This takes a little bit of seeing things in reverse, because what I'm actually doing is I'm throwing the vessel upside down. When I open it to the wheel head, I'm actually opening the mouth of the vessel. I'm gonna flatten it out a little more now. Got a big bubble there. We're gonna get rid of that. Where'd he go? There's one. There's another one. There's the big one. Okay, open the mouth again. Now what I'm going to start doing is to make the inside part of the vessel. I like these to be a little bit thicker on the rim because I do things with the top of the vessel. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull up the walls and then I'm going to close it off just like I did on my ball. So I do a lot of the same techniques for the different kinds of vessels I make because I'm not one to make the same thing over and over. I don't think I could be that much of a perfectionist. Too stressful to try to make everything the same. So that's why I have some vessels that are like vases. That's why I have some sculpture. That's why I have some smooth-sided pots or some double-wall vessels. Okay, now I've opened up a space a couple inches from the center of my pot. What I'm going to do now is throw the other side of the double-wall vessel. And you just want it to be taller than the middle piece. When I go to art shows, lots of people ask me how I can make it look like it's solid, but it's so light. And that's because of these two walls. From the top, looking to the inside, it looks like it's a solid piece of maybe marble or stone or maybe even sculptured wax. But it's just the clay with two walls. Now for all of the potters out there that have problems making this and having it crack, because that's what happens when you have a flat piece of pottery, I leave it on my bat until I know that it's good and dry. If you don't want the very top of your double wall vessel to be smooth and straight, I have some that are smooth and straight and I've put feathers on them or I've put horsehair on them. But some I've done with quite a bit of texture by using this wire, which is actually a spring that's stretched out. And in the pottery field, they call it a wiggle wire. And it's because you stick it underneath your pot and you wiggle it back and forth and pull it out. And there you go. That's the reason that you make the top of your pot, which when you're working on it looks like the bottom of your pot, thick so that you can drag the wire through and it won't break through your pot. I will leave this till it's totally dry, and when I take it off, it'll have a wavy texture, kind of like ripples. We're doing this filming here in my backyard, which you can see behind me is the beautiful Red Lake. If you look in my little entryway, I've got newcomers there who are homesteading. There's a mama bird out there, and I watched her build her nest out of clay. I don't know where she got it, but she's got little lumps of clay in her nest, and she built it up starting from the bottom up, and she sits in her little nest and she lets me visit with her. When I come out of my house, I can talk to her and ask her if she's hiding from the rain or the storm or the wind, which we've been having a lot of lately, and she listens. When she first saw me come out, she tried to pretend that she wasn't there, and she'd be sitting inside her little nest just as still, without moving, not blinking a little eye or not moving a little feather, just sitting, and she lets me talk to her. She does fly away every once in a while. I don't know if she thinks I'm a crazy person for talking to her in some languages. She has no idea what I'm saying, but she's a cute little thing, and it turns out she's a mother. Now we have 4 baby birds. So now my little studio, my clay studio, is not only the home of a clay person, it's the home of a clay bird who likes making her home out of clay also. I'm not shy at all about asking people to teach me something. And I'm so lucky that I live where I do here in Minnesota because of the Region 2 Arts Council. They've given me 3 grants, I believe, to attend different workshops. So I've gone to a Raku Rendezvous in Minneapolis. I went to a workshop in Texas, and I went to another workshop in Phoenix, and I've learned different techniques at all of the workshops. I've been taught by people as far away as Belgium, Wally Asselberg, and he's one of the moderators for a listserv that I belong to called Naked Raku. And I've got the advantage of learning from thousands of people, but my biggest helps have been the workshops that I've been able to attend because people interested in the arts, like Region 2 Arts Council, and my tribe even has given me a studio or a home to do all of my pottery.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Common Ground. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. If you enjoyed this episode of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.